Back in Dallas, our coverage of the 2014 Final Four continuing here on BTN. Dave Revsine, Jim Jackson, Steve Bardo, and so pleased to be joined by the head coach of the University of Illinois, John Groce. Coach, I want to get your thoughts on the Final Four in just a bit, but first, your team this year, you played so well down the stretch. You had a nice little run in the NIT as well. What do you take from this season?
Well, we take a lot, Dave. I mean, I think, for sure one of the things we talk about a lot with our guys is playing our best in February and March. This team was able to do that. It was a strange year. It was odd in terms of the peak and then the valley and then the peak at the end. But I thought our freshmen really came around, started to play well. Guys understood their roles. And the exciting thing for us is we had 3 kids sitting out, that were double-figure scorers at their previous institutions. Great kids that really battled us every day. We came up with a scout team concept where you usually don't have 3 guys sitting out. But there were days where that team really took it to the other guys, and so that part was great. We're excited to get those guys eligible this upcoming year. We had 2 freshmen, so we've got a lot to look forward to. I think on paper, which as we all know, sitting here means nothing.
Right.
It should be the most talented and the deepest team we've had in the 3 years.
Coach, I remember after you made the change in the lineup with the freshmen, we spoke. You said, I wanted to do a little bit earlier, but defensively they weren't ready. Is that the part of the game, in particular for freshmen, that's harder for them, the hardest for them to really grasp coming out of high school?
I think so, Jimmy. I think just the details, the discipline at both ends, but I think the defensive end, valuing that end, valuing rebounding. We talk all the time that, hey, everyone has to defend and rebound here. We all have responsibilities in those 2 areas, and no one's exempt from that. So I think those guys, the fact that they had to earn it, I think they really appreciated it more, and then obviously added some offensive firepower, which we desperately needed to our team. So it was good. I thought the timing was good, and those guys took advantage of it late.
Coach, when we look at the season that is ending with the Big Ten, it was a juggernaut. Can you talk about the depth and how good the league was from top to bottom this year?
It was amazing, Stephen. I've been wrong a lot in my life, but the one thing I said before the season started was, and I know the league was really good a year ago. Right. It was terrific. But I just felt like from top to bottom when I looked at it, who was coming back, what transfers were being added to rosters, continuity and stability with some previous year, first-year coaches like myself now getting into their second year.
Right.
I just thought top to bottom it was going to be stronger than it was even in my first year, and obviously I think it played itself out that way when you look at what all 12 teams were able to do night in, night out.
Coach, and what's the next step for your team? You're kind of right there on the cusp of kind of getting over the top. What is it going to take for you to take that next step as far as being an elite team again back in the Big Ten?
Sure. I think the offensive end, Jimmy, and certainly, I've told our guys we don't want to give up what we did on the defensive end. Heading into the Final Four weekend, we were 13th in the nation defensively, second or third, depending on how this weekend's statistics end up with the Final Four in Wisconsin in the league in the Big Ten defensively. So we guarded. Now we want to keep that, and then we've got to be better offensively. We weren't good enough offensively. We've got to get more skilled in the offseason. I think the addition of some shooters that were sitting out will help us tremendously. But we've got to get better on that end of the floor, and I think once we kind of get that working in concert with how hard we played defensively night in and night out and rebounded night in and night out, we've got a chance.
I'm gonna put you in the coach's position. So Wisconsin going against Kentucky. What are the areas that Wisconsin can have an advantage in your opinion?
Well, obviously a lot of talk has been made of Kentucky's young kids, and they're not young anymore. You get to this stage, they played X number of games, so many minutes, so I don't know if that's that much of a factor. I do think that Wisconsin offensively, I've watched coaches' teams over the years. He's had some great teams. I think it's the best offensive team that in my opinion, that he's had. I think because of that, they have multiple guys that can score, multiple guys that can make shots, multiple guys that can get to double figures. And I think obviously you saw last weekend how tough a cover Kaminsky is at the 5.
For sure.
Both inside and out. I think offensively they've got some things going there. Where my concern probably would be keeping Kentucky off the glass, their raw size and athleticism and strength up front in the front court.
Coach, when you look at the Kentucky team, one of the, I think, advantages they had against Michigan, they were able to break down the Michigan defenders off the dribble, cause rotations, offensive rebounds. You know how Bo plays defense, like to shrink the court. How important is not only do they stop penetration, but that Bruss, Decker, and Geyser can also create penetration for themselves.
I think it's a great point you're making, Jimmy, because sometimes, people watch and say, why aren't they blocking out? Well, what they don't see is the penetration that takes place, and you know that from playing. Both you guys do. Now, all of a sudden, the defense gets in rotation. Yeah. You start going to help somebody, shot gets up on the rim, and a guy gets a naked run at the glass. And I thought that happened a lot watching the Kentucky-Michigan game. Jimmy brings up a great point. I think the more that Wisconsin can shrink the floor, protect that paint, keep everything in front of them, it's going to give them a better chance to block out.
John Groce, head coach of the Fighting Illini. And, Coach, one final question for you. The Big Ten, as you know, has been through a long drought here of not winning a national championship. How important do you think that is for the reputation of the league to have a breakthrough here, whether it's this year or in the near future here?
Yeah, I think it helps, Dave, from a perception standpoint. But I'll be honest with you, sometimes I think it's hard to evaluate this league's better than this league just because X number of teams advanced to this weekend or made it this far in the NCAA tournament, and et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why is because I think in tournament play, a lot of times it's about matchups. Right. And I think it's about who plays well that given night. It's not necessarily like Wisconsin's playing Kentucky. That's not Big Ten playing SEC. That's Wisconsin versus Kentucky. Right. And I think some people lose that. And they get to where they start battling the conferences against one another. Do I think it helps from a perception standpoint? No question. All of us, I'm sure, we're all rooting for the Big Ten. We want them to push through this weekend. That helps. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that's always reality. I think there's more to it than – I don't think you can gauge a conference is better than another conference just because of how far teams advance in a tournament. I really believe it's more about matchups.
You're certainly going to get no argument here. I mean, I think it's a very overly simplistic way to look at it. But I think, unfortunately, kind of in the world we live in, it's often oversimplified. And there is this fact that – it has been since 2000 that the Big Ten has won an NCAA tournament. We'll see whether or not it happens this year. John Groce, congratulations on a good first couple of years at Illinois. I know you've got a good team coming back next year, and we appreciate you spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you guys. You guys have been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.